Welcome, fellow beekeepers. This is Jamie Walters, OSBA's Maumee Valley Director and News Editor. I'm pleased to announce OSBA's new live webinar training series. Live sessions are recorded on the second and fourth Sunday of each month, 7 p.m. through Zoom conference call. You're welcome to attend by making a reservation on OSBA's website at www.ohiostatebeekeepers.org. Go to the events page and scroll down to the event you would like to attend. Confirm your RSVP by filling out the registration form with your city, state, name, and email address. Approximately 2 hours before the beginning of Sunday's webinar, an active Zoom link will be sent to your email address. Each training session will be recorded and posted on the following Sunday on OSBA's new YouTube channel. You can find it at Ohio State Beekeepers Association. You're welcome to subscribe and be sure to click the bell to be alerted each time we upload a new video. Each month's speakers and presentation will be posted on the Facebook page, by direct email to registered and paid members, and our website at ohiostatebeekeepers.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at editor@ohiostatebeekeepers.org. And now on to our previous recorded webinar. And I'm honored to present Mr. Kim Flottum, who has a degree in horticulture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He worked 4 years as a USDA honeybee research lab. He studied pollinator ecology. I kind of ran into him when I started buying all his books. 4 years he worked for everything, and then he started getting into running the podcast show with the Kim and Jim show, and I subscribed to that. And he was the editor for years for the Bee Culture and now retired. Some of his best books that he wrote was The Backyard Beekeeper, In Business with Bees, which I have all these books, The Honey Connoisseur, which was one of my favorite books. And my personal favorite as far as being a bee inspector is Honeybee Pests, Predators, and Disease. I know he's doing a lot of different things now, so I'm going to turn it over to Kim. Thank you very much. We're going to shut off the poll, and thank you everybody for doing that. So, Mr. Flottum, it is your show.
Okay, Jamie. I want to point out one thing. Pests, Predators, and Diseases. The Root Company published that. I didn't write it.
Oh,
that was a Dr. Morse book. But thank you for all of the other comments. It's been a strange spring, hasn't it? And early summer. But I'm gonna guess that almost everybody listening to this tonight has somebody at home who has looked at you when you said, I want to buy a new, and said, I thought we were going to make money on this. And suddenly you have to think about what you promised that person 2, 3, 5 years ago when you did say, well, we can make money on this. So what I want to do tonight is help you out of that situation and make it so that you can let your bees pay their way. So that the money isn't all going in one direction. You can get it going, some of it going back. So let's see how this is going to work. All right, Jamie, how do I make the slide advance?
All right, just go ahead and hit your keyboard, your space bar, or your mouse. And it should advance
there we go. Okay.
All right, there you go.
Thank you for that. What I want you to look at or to think about right now is that if you're to the point where you're worried about money, I can bet that the road to getting there this started out as a hobby, and then it got to be more than a hobby, and then it got to be more than a sideline, and now what do I do? Because I'm spending too much time keeping bees and I'm not making enough money doing it. And my goal here is to get you on the road to making what you have or what you want to do work better for you. So let's get away from spending way too much time. And there we go. Before you get started on this, here's something to do, not tonight probably, but maybe this weekend or next weekend, is where are you now? What do you want to, what have you got? And by that, I mean everything that you've got going for you right now. Where are you now? Define your position in your world. And it may be, if you're retired like me, it's not going to be your job, but if it's your job, where are you going? Your family, your home, all of these things. Where are you now? The next question to ask is, where do you want to be? What's your goal? Where do you want this to take you? And I'm talking primarily about beekeeping, but beekeeping is going to be interacting with a lot of other things that you're doing in the rest of your life. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? And the last question, of course, is how are you going to get there? What's the best route to get to that goal? May not be the shortest route, may not be the cheapest route, but what's the best route you're going to take to get there? So when I say where are you now, I mean kind of all of these things. Document your bee stuff. How much stuff do you get packed? You know how many boxes I've got stacked in the back of my garage? Count them. And do they have frames? And I inventory your equipment, inventory the stuff that you have. Take a look at what your job is. Is your job making a lot of time commitments? Is it making you be out of town? Is it keeping you away from home? And then your family and your future family commitments. You got a bunch of kids. You're looking at a lifetime of spending a lot of time with them, doing things, helping them, growing with your family. And then, of course, there's the other people in your life who have a honey-do list. What's going on in the rest of your life? You got things to fix in the house. You got, the honey-do list. And then what is your bee yard and business commitments? What promises have you made for the rest of this year, the next winter, and next year that you're going to have to keep? Do you have to keep them? Do you want to keep them? Have you, stretched, maybe you stretched things too far? And then just do a count of bee yards. Do you have, how are they? Are they too far apart? Do you spend too much time traveling? How many do you have? Do you have too many hives in each one? Do you have enough beehives in each one? Take a look at doing inventorying your bee yards. And then you got the rest of life, ongoing bills and living expenses. And this spring, life has been crazy for all of that. And I don't know where you are, but I'm going to bet it's different than it was this time last year. So how is this going to help or hinder you when you want to get to where you want to be? So that's probably the hardest one of these, is your ongoing bills and living expenses, because frankly, it's up in the air what's going to happen to a lot of people. If you aren't working at the moment, and you should be, there's that. If you are working and you're lucky, there's that. But sit down and honestly evaluate all of these things. Where are you now? And calculate your financial, social, family, and beekeeping net worth. And then where do you want to be? And I want to be big enough. I want to be big enough to quit my day job. I want to be big enough to pay my bills. I want to be big enough to put my kids through college if they can help. I want to be big enough to supply all my customers with my honey. I want to be big enough to be my own boss. I want to be big enough to be rich. I want to be very rich. Which one of those is where you want to go? That's the kind of answer. I'm big enough where I'm at right now. I can count my hives on two hands, some years one hand. And I'm big enough. I don't want to get any bigger, but I know people that want to get a lot bigger than that. They see this as a way to finish their life or keep going on the rest of their life. So once you decide how big you want to be, how soon do you need to get there? And is this going to be something you're going to turn around, this summer, or do you have a 6-month plan, or a 2-year plan, or maybe it's a 10-year plan? The way things are going, with the way people are making splits and nukes, you can be pretty big pretty fast. You can make a lot of bees in a hurry, which leads you to a whole other set of issues. But how soon do you need to be there? And then you need to get everything but the buzz. And I mean everything but the buzz when it comes to dollars and cents, or at least enough to break even considering the pollination benefits that bees are giving your crops or your gardens or your neighbors or whatever. But you got to get everything but the buzz out of your bees if you're going to make this work. Now, getting everything but the buzz out of your bees may be pushing them really hard, stretching them really far, making them work really hard, and making sure that everything that they do makes you money. There's a whole lot less than that you can get out of your bees and still meet the goals that you want. And being a little more, I'll use the term here, natural, less management and more bee-friendly behavior, that may be the way to get where you want to be. And make sure that you explore that continuum, because that's what it is. It's a continuum from hardly anything to pushing them as hard as I get and getting as much as I can out of them. Where on that continuum do you want to be? So what can you do with a hive of bees, or 10, or 100? Well, there's a lot of things you can do, and honey production is certainly one of the first things people think about. Not the only thing, and we're going to look at all of those, but honey production may be one of the first things that and maybe that's all that you're doing right now, is producing honey, and it's not getting you where you want to go, or I'm not making enough honey to get where I want to go, or they're not making enough, well, there's all sorts of in-betweens there. So honey production may be one of the things, but let's take a look at honey production for the moment. And I got a box here covering up some of my numbers, Dan. There you go. The 2019 crop was 150 million pounds in the U.S. There was some drought and some west and the east, south, east. There's good parts of the Midwest, 97 million acres of corn. And so you look at this and you say, you know, do I want to make bees or I want to make honey? 4.2 million colonies in 1980, and you can see the numbers there. Right now, almonds take 2+ million colonies every spring. And when you look at how many colonies there were in March last year, 1.8 million, we're short a few bees. And to replace a colony today, if you go by the commercial beekeepers that I've talked to, it's going to cost you about $375. That's in labor, parts, management, all of the things put together to get a colony up to pollination strength. In February, it's going to cost you right about $375. Now, the one thing I'm going to say here, I'm going to say it again and again and again: are you counting your labor? I don't know hardly any beekeeper that pays himself a salary or herself a salary. They don't consider their labor as an expense, which tells me that you have no value in your labor. So when you start looking at all of these things that you're itemizing, how many hours a week are you putting into this job, and how much are you paying me? Or how much? Well, you can pay me. How much are you paying yourself to do this? How much are you making on your bees? And I'm going to bet a lot of people are saying, well, you know, that's my investment. I'm not paying myself because I'm investing that labor, and that's a value. But consider that value when you're adding these numbers up. Consider that value, even if you're not giving yourself a paycheck once a week or once a month. Your labor has a value. It has a cost, and it has a value in your operation. So consider that. Looking at U.S. honey production, average per year, the last 32 years, 192 million. Last 10 years, 172 million. Last 3 years, 154 million. That's the average the last 3 years. Do you see a trend here? What's going on with honey production? U.S. consumption. You can see 2019 was 610 million pounds in the U.S. We produced hardly any of that, but we consume 610 million pounds. That's that's 1.6 pounds per person. That's per capita consumption. And 9 years ago, there was a half a pound, 1.1 pounds per person 9 years ago. Imports, you can see how much the imports are and where they're coming from. That 610 million compared to what we produce in this country is all imports. So again, is the future of your business in honey. Can you compete with 90 cent a pound honey from India? Can you compete with $1.10 a pound honey from Brazil? What does it cost you to produce a pound of honey? Do you have an idea of, in your operation, what it costs to produce a pound of honey, counting your labor? Is honey going to be a viable market in the future? This value of the honey crop last year was $309 million, and the value of the pollination market in this country last year was 21 billion. 399 million versus 21 billion. There's too many crooks in the business. Is local honey the future, and the new safety regulations and the honey house? Do you believe what you read on a bottle of honey in Costco? So, you're looking at the future of your business. You got to look at the future of the business that you're in, and this is one thing to consider. There is one good thing that's coming up, and it's called a commercial item description. And if you take a look at the description, the USDA description of honey, it's something about a sweet, syrupy liquid made from the nectar of flowers collected by bees. You can put it in one paragraph, and that's all you have to compare it to. The commercial item description, however, is a USDA document. If the federal government is going to buy something, they're going to say, okay, I want to buy this widget, and this is the description of the widget I want to buy, and if I'm going to buy it, what you're going to give me exactly fits that description. Well, they are now making a commercial item description for honey, and it's 12 pages long. And it's a lot of governmentese, but it's also all of the tests that it has to pass by certain percentages, all of the things that it can't contain, all of the things that it should contain. It's 12 pages long, and it is going to make honey once it's adopted. They haven't adopted it yet. They've been sitting on it, and I'm not sure why. But once that commercial item description is made law, and they have it for almost everything they buy. They have it for everything that the U.S. government buys from anybody in the world. They have one of these. They don't have one for honey, and we're going to have one pretty soon. So if you go looking, you want to see what it is, you can just go to the USDA and put in commercial item description in the question, and it'll take you to the document. You can print it out, sit back with 2 cups of coffee, because it'll take you that long to read it, but now you can see what people are going to have to be doing. Okay. In 1950, a beekeeper's income was about honey was about 90% of a commercial beekeeper's income, pollination and everything else about 10%. In 1980, it went to a 60-40 split, and in 2018, it went to a 20-80 split. 20% of a commercial beekeeper's income today is made from honey versus 90%, back in 1950. Here's another trend. Do you see what's going on? It's pretty obvious. How much honey per colony in the U.S.? Well, it depends on where you are. Of course, on a good year, U.S. is going to average about 200 pounds. On an average year, it's closer to 100. On a bad year, much closer to 50. Right now, you need 166 pounds of honey per colony to break even on honey production costs. Make 166 pounds last year? If you did, great. I'd like you to share what you did, but a lot of us didn't, and that's for every colony every year. So taking a look at how much honey your colonies are making compared to the cost of producing that honey. Well, you can look at pollination, and then you can look at honey production. And I'm going to tell you right now, honey production is a crapshoot. That's why I've got the Las Vegas thing up there. It's a crapshoot every year. If it doesn't rain, if it rains too much, if the housing development goes in next door, if they change that empty lot out back to corn and or soybeans, it's a crapshoot. You never know. You never are. You never can be positive how good your honey crop's going to be in any given year, and knowing that, okay, I got to make this much honey per colony. I got to make it this much honey per colony every year, and I've got to have this many colonies to pay all my bills. What are you willing to bet that that's going to happen? Are you going to willing to bet on the weather? When I talk to farmers, one of the things that I say, are you willing to bet on the weather? And of course, almost all of the older guys in the back are nodding their heads no, but the younger ones in the front are going, yeah, I'll bet on the weather. You know, I got all of these apps and I listen to the forecast every night, and I'm pretty sure what's going to happen. And then that's when I say, I'll meet you at the auction when they have to sell your farm. Same thing here. You're betting on the weather. Land use has changed a lot, and it's continuing to change. Forage loss, population shift, 320 million to 170 million live on that. Let me back up a step. You see that back line, that black line on the US map? 320 million people down, lost my point here. 320 million people live on that line. 300, that's, I'm sorry. 170 million people out of the 320 million people population. I'll get it right yet. 170 million out of our 320 million population live on that black line. Everything else in the middle is the rest of the population and corn and soybeans and roads and houses and all of the things that don't make honey. 50, so 50 million are living in the middle as farmers, and you're looking at developments coming up. How many of you have had more than 50 house development go in your town in the last 3 years? I'm going to bet a lot, because Ohio's expanding, and this is what we're looking forward to. Okay, how do you make up for that? If you're not making much honey or as much honey as you need to make, can you cut some corners? And unfortunately, sometimes corners are cut. My golden rule is honey don't ever blend to cover high moisture. And sometimes you can get some high moisture bee yards and some really low moisture bee yards, and you put them together and you got a average moisture bee product. What about bad flavor or light and dark honey? You can sell the light, you can't sell the dark. What about bad flavor? Or to change the flavor? What about adding pollen so people think that when you hold that jar up and it's a little bit cloudy, yeah, that's got to be natural honey. Don't blend to cover overheating, and don't dilute varietal content. If you can say it's 80% sourwood or 80% clover or 80% whatever, and if I can cut it 20%, it's still more than 50%. I can still say it's clover and sell it for a premium price. Not done a lot by anybody that I know, but I know that it's done. So, these are some golden rules. Don't ever, honey, don't ever. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We do things to honey that we probably shouldn't be doing. And of course, I'm looking here at primarily mite treatments and old comb and all of the things that we do to our bees that would be good if we didn't. So, there's rules in place on how to use them, when to use them, and how much to use, and they're there for a reason. So don't wreck your crop because you were trying to take a shortcut. And how big do you want to be? If you've got 5 colonies now and you want to expand, okay, you do the math and you just start figuring out. You say, okay, I'm going to have to get up to at least 50 colonies. Do you have the space? Do you have the equipment? Do you have the time? And therein lies the questions that you answered earlier on in this endeavor: is how much time do I have? How much money have I got access to? How much? And is it going to be enough? So that's one of the things that you really need to figure out. If you're running 5 colonies, and you want to go to 50, that 2-frame extractor is going to have to change. So my thinking is do the math before you get in over your head and you can't figure out how to get out of it. Uh, but you know, small is can be good. Um, there's nothing wrong with being small. And an old friend of mine down the bottom there, Bob Smith from the Toledo area, had everything he needed in a small bathroom in the basement, and that's as big as he wanted to get. You can get bigger, of course. You can have have a roadside stand. You can have a big or a little one. You can so figure out how much you need, and then what's probably good advice is don't quite get there. Don't get to where you think you want to be and then end up over your head. Get to where you're almost there and take 3 steps back and reevaluate. Is this the right size? Is this the way I want to do this? Is this how I can do this? Is this as much as I can do? And once you've answered those questions, and all the people that you are living with, by the way, are comfortable with the answers, then you can move forward again a little bit. But make sure that you're on solid footing every time you make an advance. A good way to make money: selling varietal honey. And that's primarily from one source of nectar. Technically, it's supposed to be made from at least 51% or more of the nectar that you named it after. I'd like to think that it should be almost pure, but if you make a claim, be prepared to prove it. You got clover honey on that label, and I say, well, show me. And can you show that that's really a jar of clover honey? You can tell people where your bees are and it's surrounded by sweet clover field, or I'm not sure. How can you prove that what you say is true? At a farm market, that's where it's tough. You can probably do it by sending in some honey and having somebody look at the pollen, but how can you prove it at a farm market? So if you're going to make a claim, and if you're comfortable with that claim, then I urge you to do it. But be like I said, be prepared to prove it at a farm market. And the varietal crops around here is goldenrod and white and yellow sweet clover, and you can see all of the plants that are there. The one I like, I think, the most is loosestrife, purple loosestrife. That's a really easy one to prove because when you first bottle it, it looks like 10W30 motor oil. It's almost got a greenish tint to it. So it's kind of easy to prove. The rest of these are a little bit difficult to prove, but they're all varietal crops. I can make a varietal crop in every one of these from my backyard in here in Medina. I might have a hard time with loosestrife. I don't have enough loosestrife, but all the rest of them, there's enough. And then what about how you use the honey? Sometimes you get a honey that's perfect for barbecue sauce or baking or tea or toast, or well, what can you use honey for? Savannah Honey does this. They started a bunch of years ago. They've got a honey that's perfect for barbecue sauce, and they've got a honey that's perfect for all sorts of things. English breakfast honey, sweet lamb claries, vintage year. Now, you want to do something really cool sometime. When somebody comes back to your farm stand and they say, I was here last year and I got a bottle of your 2018 honey, or 2019 or whatever it is. And then you just sort of look at them for a minute, and then you look underneath your bench and you reach under and you bring out that bottle and you say, boy, are you lucky, I've got one left. How much you going to give me for it? So I'm being kind of facetious, but if somebody buys a jar of your honey and it's got, you see where this is going, and it's got wildflower on it, and you give them a jar of wildflower and it's totally different this year than last year, they're going to be really disappointed. But if you've got fall honey or spring honey or whatever it is that you sold them last year, you're going to have your fall honey this year is going to be a lot more like the fall honey was last year than something called wildflower. So If you call your spring wildflower and your summer wildflower and your fall wildflower, you can't tell the difference in the name. And people are going to say, this guy's all over the map. I don't know what this stuff is. So give it a name that people can remember. Have you tried infused honey? I've made infused honey with orange peel. And what you do is you take orange peel and you put it in a gauze bag and you throw it. I use the peel from about 10 oranges in a 5-gallon bucket, and I put it in there and I let it sit for a week. And when I pull it out, it's got that honey's got this nice faint touch of orange flavor. Some people like pepper. My friend Buzz here in Medina makes. Well, I consider it the worst honey ever concocted, because he puts enough hot peppers in it to food shouldn't hurt, and his honey hurts. But he's got a lot of people that just love it, just love his hot pepper honey. So there's all sorts of things that you can do, herbs and spices, and like I said, the zest from oranges or peel. You got to label it like that. You got to say, honey. Orange peel flavored honey or hot pepper honey. You gotta give it a name and tell people what to expect, but it's worth a premium price. And if you haven't tried it yet, really think about trying some this year. Here it is. To break even today, mostly, commercial beekeepers need to get the same price for a pound of honey as they paid for a gallon of diesel fuel. That's right about what people are looking at. When you say, what do you got to get? You got a guy with 1,000 colonies, and he's in the 250 range, somewhere that neighborhood. That's what he has to get to stay even, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.50 to $3. And that keeps changing. If a sideline operation is paying attention to costs, they should be getting 2 times that price wholesale to break even. Your cost per unit is going to be higher just because you're smaller and you're less efficient. So when you're looking at pricing your honey, and the next half of that question is, I'll ask it again, how much does it cost you to produce a pound of honey? Do you know? And when you figure it out, it comes out to be $9.40, maybe you should be thinking of another way to make money. But know your costs and then sell your honey accordingly. Like I said, don't sell wildflower honey. Let's get rid of wildflower honey. Local honey, U.S. honey, varietal. How many of you put U.S. or Ohio or Medina County honey on your honey? So people, and when you say local honey, what's local? Well, if you're at a farm market, you can kind of guess. But if I put Medina County honey on it, then people know. So U.S. honey, varietal honey, useful honey, infused, vintage, seasonal, your honey. Do you put your name on it? This is Kim's honey. I tried that once. It didn't work because nobody knew who Kim was, so it didn't help me any. But if people know you're the local beekeeper and you put your name on your jar of honey, it's going to help sell honey. Well, then we mentioned it briefly, and the other one is, okay, let's take a look at pollination. That is the way that commercial beekeeping is going. It's that 80-20 split anymore, pollination and honey, 80-20. But if you're going to do this, know what you're getting into, and I'm going to go into some detail here, but know what you're getting into if you're going to start pollinating. It's you've got all sorts of things to look at. You've got staging and storing. Where are you going to put them before the crop, after the crop? You've got maybe you and 3 people can share a load and take a load out to California for almonds. Can you do that? Do you have insurance for this? Lots of travel. Are you going to, and then there's the pesticide issue. And what crops can you pollinate? Around my part of Ohio, there aren't a whole lot. But if I want to travel a little bit, there's quite a few. And if I want to go 200 miles, I can run into quite a bit of crop. I don't want to go across the street to pollinate crops, to be perfectly honest. But if you're looking at this as a way to increase your income, what crops are in your area that you can pollinate? And how big are you going to get? Are you going to have a trailer load? Are you going to have a truckload? Or are you going to have a semi-load? And how much is that going to cost you to get ready? So let's take a look at a bunch of the things, and let take a look at that thing in the middle. A handshake is not a good contract, ever, never, ever. You got to have something in writing. I know a lot of people that have been pollinating with growers, the same grower for 30 years, a handshake is good until something happens. And then that handshake isn't going to be as good anymore. You've seen this. In 1950, honey was about 90% of a commercial beekeeper's income. And today, honey is less than 20% of a commercial beekeeper's income. Pollination and selling bees is making up the best. And selling bees, we're going to look at that. There is another thing to think about. So if you're going to get into this, beekeeper, know yourself. Are you a good enough beekeeper to do this? Can you keep your bees alive all summer long, all winter long? Do you have enough money for equipment, for insurance? What do you need insurance if you're going to put bees on a truck and haul them 200 miles? What kind of insurance do you need? Any kind of difference? What if you lose half your colonies next winter and you've got contracts? Do you have a way to get replacements? Can you make up from what you've got? Can you get them from somebody else? Can you buy enough? Can you meet the schedules needed? If you got a day job, you're going to be doing this nights and weekends. And can you do that? Do you have the necessary labor? And by that, I mean that really good friend of yours at work, who says, yeah, I can help you tonight. I have nothing better to do. And what do you pay him? And what if you drop a colony on him and he breaks a leg? Do you have liability insurance or workman's comp for this? These are all things to roll around in your mind if you're beginning to think of doing this for income. And I'll tell you this, know more about the crop you're pollinating than the growers do. You just simply got to know that. You got to know as much as they do, and then you got to know a little bit more. Because that way you can anticipate all of the things that can happen, all of the questions to ask, and all of the things that can go wrong. When does the crop bloom? How many colonies are needed per acre? What are the worst pests and predators those crops have that the farmer is going to be spraying for? And when does he spray? At the beginning of bloom, after bloom, before, when, and what chemicals are they using? I want them to show me the can. I want to know that the spray he's using is a registered spray on the crop he's growing. I'm not taking any chances. These bees are my livelihood, and I'm not going to take a chance that this guy's cutting corners by using something off-label. So have them show you the label. Is irrigation necessary? And if it is, are irrigation pipes in the way? Can you get in to see your bees? And if they're going to irrigate, when do they irrigate? Do they irrigate every day? Do they irrigate at night? Do they irrigate just on an as needed basis? These are the things you're going to need to know. And how long does bloom last? On a short year and a long year. If it's cool and cloudy, it's going to last longer than hot and sunny. And what's the shortest time it can last, and what's the longest time it can last? And if that longest time, if you're pollinating 2 crops, and that longest time is going to take your bees 3 to 5 days longer to be in that orchard when they should be in another farmer's field someplace, what do? Do you cut the guy short that you're pollinating for so you can make the other one, or what? And be ready to know the answer to that question. And as I said, all your question, everything needs to be spelled out in a pollination contract. A one-page pollination contract isn't going to cover it. You got to know the answers to all those questions. And all of these, I got a bunch of these. So be ready, because there's a lot of detail that goes into a pollination contract, because this is business for you. This is business for the farmer. And you really don't want to get lawyers involved if you don't have to. So who's participating? Names and addresses. The number of colonies are going to be involved. The quality and the delivery of the colonies, and that's basically size. Almonds is 8 frames. Bees and brood, and maybe yours are going to be smaller because they're really early, or really bigger because they're really late. But to spell it out, when do they have to be delivered? And usually that's 2 days before bloom, which is anywhere from May 10th to May 15th. Know that there may be a spread there, and then be able and anticipate it. How much are they paying for a standard colony, for a premium colony? What if they're not quite as good as they should be? Is there going to be a penalty? When do you get paid? Where do you put them in the orchard? You put them all. Some farmers are going to want you to dump them all in one place, and they will move the pallets. A lot of farmers say just put them every 5th tree. And a lot of farmers are going to go, I don't know. You put them where you think they should be. Where should they be? Know where they should be. Every 5th row, every 2nd row, halfway in, halfway. know what to anticipate when you ask that question. Now, offloading site or sites is what I just mentioned. You'd put half of them on one end of the orchard and half of them on the other end of the orchard, and they spread them out the way they want them. And the way they want them might not make sense to you, but if they're spraying, if they're watering, if they're pruning, if they're driving tractors in and out, if they've got people in the orchards, they're going to want them where they're going to keep their workers safe and where the bees are going to do the most good and encounter the least damage. More things to consider in a contract. Insurance. What happens if there's an apple orchard and it's next to a street and somebody's walking along the street and they get stung? Who's responsible for that person getting stung? You, the orchard owner, the person who got stung? So have that explained. And what if one of the workers for the farmer gets stung and dies? Where's the responsibility? To me, it's obvious, but make sure it's in the contract. Fungicide mix and tank mixes in almonds have been terrible. The fungicide's legal, the insecticide's legal, but when you put them together, they're lethal. And make sure that you are covered against unknown chemical problems. Theft. What if somebody comes into the orchard and steals your bees? In almonds, it's real common. In other crops, it's somewhat common. But what happens if somebody steals your bees? Who buys you your new bees? Are you responsible? Is the grower responsible? Is there insurance for that? Like I said, liability to the public or employees, payment resolution. What if the guy doesn't pay you? Just says, nope, ain't got the money, didn't make it this year, can't pay you. In a contract, you're going to have something. These are the steps you follow if you can't pay me. And do you have accessibility at all times? Can you get in that orchard at 11:30 at night to fix your bees because they need fixing, and that's the only time you can do it? Or is the orchard locked? A good commercial beekeeper I know in California keeps a chain cutter in the back of his truck because it's the universal key, as he puts it. And if he's got to get into an orchard at 11:30 at night, he can. I'll tell the farmer about it in the morning, but I got to be able to get into the orchard when I got to be able to get in. What are the penalties if either fail? If you don't bring enough colonies, your colonies aren't strong enough. If something he does doesn't meet what you thought he was going to do. What about acts of God? What about a tornado? Tornado goes through an apple orchard one night, takes out 2/3 of your colonies and half of his trees. What happens? It's an act of God. Arbitration, if there's a problem, do both of you agree to talk to an arbitrator or an attorney or somebody that maybe knows something about agriculture? Here's an interesting situation. A beekeeper I knew had his apples in an apple orchard, and during bloom, the owner of the apple orchard died. And the estate said, until we determine everything we need to determine about those hives, they have to stay where they are. And they lived in that apple orchard all summer. And it was because there was nothing in the farmer's will and nothing in the contract that said, this is how you handle this situation. Do your bees have water? Is there a safe water source? And is the farmer keeping it full? If the safe water source is that the bees are going to is where he empties his spray tank when he's done, you don't have a safe water source, and you need to make sure that that happens. A contract should specify the responsibility for the colony while pollinating is solely the growers, not yours. What goes on in that orchard is his responsibility. You bring him in, you set him down, he okays the strength, you get out, and you're gone. So one final point here. How much do you charge and when do you get paid? That's got to be in the contract, and it's got to be in the contract. I get paid the day I take my bees out. I get paid within 30 days after I take my bees out. I get paid before I bring my bees. All of those things can be in a contract, and that makes sure that you do get paid. And you've already got the arbitration thing figured out so that if you don't get paid, you've got someplace to go. How much time? And Jamie, can you make that box go away?
What box is that, sir?
I got an admit box at the top of my screen.
Yep, just go ahead and exit that out or minimize it.
Uh, here's a thing. Here's the thing to think about when you want to say, how much am I going to charge for this? You know how much it costs you to get your colony ready. My colony on the 1st of May, I've spent this much on this colony since July last year. And this is how much this colony, how much time have you spent, what's the cost of medications, feeding, have you requeened, replacement bees, travel during the season, everything you put into those colonies, that's your cost. So if you take, okay, that's my cost for this colony. If you say, okay, I'm going to put the colony on these colonies on this truck and I'm going to drive 2 hours, and there's my time, 2 hours back, 2 hours there, 2 hours back. I know that cost. I know the cost of wear and tear in my truck. That's a transportation cost. So you end up with, when you're trying to figure out your cost for pollination, you end up, you're kind of a two-phase price for the grower. I rent my colonies for this much and I have a transportation fee, cost plus freight. Now that's not how you're going to explain it to them, but that's how you're going to figure it out. That's how you got to figure it out. You got to know all of those costs up to the time you put it on the truck, cost on time on the truck, and cost in getting them back, and your time going there to check them. Don't forget all of that. So cost plus freight. If you got 1,000 colonies or you got 100 colonies or you want to get to 100 colonies, those are the things, the honey production scale, the pollination scale, that you're going to think about. But most of us don't have 100 or 1,000. Most of it has 2, maybe as many as 5. But there's still that voice in the back of the room that says, "I thought we were going to make money on this." That you got to answer to. So if you've got 5 or 10, there's a lot of ways you can make money. And I'm just going to bounce off some of these. I know all of you have thought of all of these, but I'm going to refresh you. All of these things can make you money with 5 colonies of bees. Every one of them. You can sell pollen, you can make soap, you can sell propolis, you can do something like Ukrainian Easter eggs, you can make candle globes, you can make poured candles, you can trap pollen. All of these things you can do on a small scale to sell to people at like farm markets or even friends and neighbors to make a little bit of money. And a little bit of money may be all you need. But these are things that you can do. Honeybee removal. I learned that Jamie is a honeybee removal tonight. I heard him talking to some of the people. So if you want to know more about this, maybe you can talk to him. He sounded like he knew a lot. But there's our people, especially in the South, that are making a living doing honeybee removal. They've got that Africanized bee issue down there, and bees move around a lot, swarm a lot, and you can make a living doing this, is honeybee removal. And you know, you could start a store. You can do it out of your garage. You really can. You know, you're open Saturdays. That's it. And if people want, you're going to be the place that people go to when I need it right now, rather than drive 20 miles to the bigger store up the road. I know I can get 5 supers from Mike, or I can get 20 frames from Sally, and you've always got it. You don't have a big inventory. You don't have a lot of cost in facilities. But if you're gonna do a store, you got to be honest. You got to do all of the things that stores do. You can also get bees. You can be the packaged bee person in your county. You can say, okay, I'm going to start working with somebody in Georgia or somebody in California or somebody, and say, I'm going to take package orders. I'm not going to make a big margin on each one, but maybe I can make up for it in volume. But it'll get you established as people knowing you're a bee person. And then you can edge into maybe having that store that you're open on Saturdays. You can also, you know, go to, you know, take stuff to shows and do demos and do classes for money. All of these things work, and I encourage you to explore every one of them before you just say, I can't do it. Queen production, that's a somewhat specialized skill. And I'm guessing that anybody that's listening to this can produce queens. Maybe not a lot of them, and there'll be some hard times in the beginning. Not hard times, but there's a learning curve to this. But anyone can produce queens. If you've got 2 colonies, you can produce queens. Your biggest problem probably is going to be drones. If you're isolated and you don't have a lot of neighbors who keep bees, drones are going to be your problem. And that's often the problem with small beekeepers, is there aren't enough drone in the local drone congregation areas. All right. Um, what kind of guarantee do you give with that queen? You get, if somebody takes her home and calls you up 4 days later and says, she died in the cage, whatever the problem is, what do you gonna give them another one? Do you say, well, sorry, a way to do this is called the taillight guarantee. As long as I can see your taillights, I'll guarantee that queen. After that, she's yours, and you can make what you want with it. But raising queens is an iffy business. It can be quite profitable. It can be somewhat risky, but you're going to be a lot better beekeeper if you start raising queens, because there's so much more you have to know and so many things that you have to do right to make this work. You can sell bees. I think Megan Milbrath was talking to the OSBA group recently. If you haven't, she's written a whole lot of articles about being sustainable, and her sustainability is making splits and being able to split her bees at the right time of the year to be able to sell them in the spring, keeping her bee population the same that it was, and having extras to sell. And therein lies like I said, honey isn't it anymore. It's pollination and it's bees, and she's making it work with bees. And one other thing, while I'm on it, I want to encourage here is to have a couple of nukes in your bee yard. Just the 5-frame nukes, and they stay 5-frame all season. They got a queen, they got frames of bees, frames of brood, and you can share them with all the rest of your colonies. I consider a nuke, I call it a bee supply store, because it's got everything any colony is going to need. Like I said, it's got queens, it's got frames of bees, it's going to have honey, it's going to have pollen, it's going to have brood. It's got everything you need. And if you keep it in your yard, and as it grows, you take out that frame of brood and you give it to one of the weaker colonies. Not that it needed it, but it's only going to help. If you need some honey for a split, there you go. You got a frame of honey that you can make. So consider having a nuke in every bee yard, or 2 or 3, but I call them a bee supply store because they got everything that a colony is going to need. If you're selling queens, or you're selling packages, or you're selling nukes, again, what kind of guarantee are you offering with these? Do you make any promises? Do you make no promises? What do you do when somebody picks up that nuke and puts it in their car and takes off? And they call you 3 days later or 3 weeks later, and that nuke died. Be ready for that question, because you're going to get it. So like I said, here you can sell overwintered nukes, spring splits, late spring splits, summer splits for varroa control. Wonderful way to look at varroa control, reducing the brood time, or the amount of brood that varroa have to infest. You can sell queens, you can sell cells. Queen cells, a lot cheaper, but a lot less risk and a lot less work. You can even sell frames of brood. All of these things, they're all commodities. Somebody somewhere wants every one of these things for their bee yards. And if you've got them and you're in business to produce them, you can sell any of these. Here's something to really think about. What about pay to take my class and get a discount on supplies and a guarantee at my store? All sorts anyway, on packages, queens, or get a discount on the supplies that you buy, or get on our email list for updates and information in a newsletter. You can do this class for free too. Either way, 2 things are going to happen. If you're a good teacher, the people who take your class are going to learn to be good beekeepers, and they're going to continue to be customers because they're still keeping bees. If they don't take a class, they don't read a book, they're going to be there they're going to go away on their 3rd season. The 3rd time their bees die, that voice in the back of the room says, I know we're not making money on this anymore. Find a different hobby. So the other thing is if you have a class, or you teach a class, you can, like I said, you can charge for it and make it free, and people will come back and buy your products, and then they start telling your friends, that guy down the road, he does good, take his class. So you begin to build your business that way, and you can do it for free. You can do rooftop bees for hotels and restaurants. I have friends in California that are making a living doing that. You can do virtual beekeepers, and custom extracting. You can keep other people's bees. I have friends in New York City that he sells them a hive. They have it in their backyard, and then he visits that hive and takes care of it for them. But then he extracts the honey. They get the honey, or most of it, some of it. And these people are all much richer than most of us are, certainly richer than I are. There's the lawyer sitting on the deck on a Sunday afternoon with his lawyer friends, and he points to the backyard and goes, "Oh, have you seen my bees?" And to him, that makes it all worthwhile. Other lawyers are impressed, and he's, you know, but they are being kept by you, so they're being kept well. You get some of the honey, and you sell them the equipment. And there's some sort of way that you deal with, if the bees die in the winter, what are you going to do next spring? Is he going to buy the bees next spring? You split the price. All sorts of things you have to figure out before you do this. But I know a lot of people that are doing well keeping other people's bees. So there you are. Let your bees pay your way. Listen to that voice in the back of the room that says, "I thought we were going to make money doing this," and doing any one, some, or all of these things. You can make some money keeping bees, have more fun, and maybe be able to quit your day job. There you are, Jamie.
All right, sir. We have a few questions for you. One is, as an urban beekeeper, how do I label my honey? A source of basswood, garden, variety of trees?
Yeah, if I was an urban beekeeper, and I was when I was in Madison, we did it two ways there. We did it, one of them was 125th. Let me back up. I had a good friend in San Francisco that labeled her honey on by the street that the beehive sat on, 125th West. That was the label on the honey. She had all the other stuff, the weight and all of those other things, but that told the customer exactly where that honey came from. Not what was in it, but where it came from. They knew it was going to be local. But the other way is just put, City of Madison honey. That's what we called it when I was in Madison. City of Madison honey. What's in it? Who knows? I mean, there's all these invasives and all these exotics and all of the things that are grown in cities. Don't have a lot of ideas of what's in it, but I can tell you where it came from, and that may be all the message that you need.
All right. One other question here. It says, who do we send our varietal honey to get validated to test and prove the content?
How much money do you have? That's a question. What's his name in Texas? Vaughn blank. There's a guy in Texas that tests honey and it'll come to me. He's written for Bee Culture a whole bunch of times, and you can send it to him. There are a few other people you can send it to, but he's the one I know, or you can contact him and he will tell you where to send it. And if I don't think of his last name by the time I'm done with this, send me an email and I will get you his last name. He's at Texas A&M.
Okay. If you can get that information, we can post that on the OSBA website for you then.
That's Kim. What I'll do. That'll be better.
Right. Here is one. It says, is there a website that you can see how many colonies are needed per colony or type of crop?
It's all over the map. I don't know of a source that's going to be able to tell you about a lot of crops. Most universities that make pollination recommendations, and not many of them do, will make a recommendation of how many per acre. Probably the best source of information is going to be the Association of Apple Growers in Ohio. I'm sure that there is one, and that's where I would go. And I'm going to bet that they don't have a web page, but they're going to have, you can ask a question there and somebody will get back to you.
All right. Is there a common place or site where farmers need pollination services to make their needs known, or where beekeepers desire pollination contracts search for farmers in need?
How familiar are you with social media? That's probably the best place to go. There are 100 beekeeping groups and 100 grower groups, and you can go to those and ask a question, and you'll get an answer, and it'll probably be a correct answer. I listen to the people in commercial beekeeping, and I ask questions there once in a while, and I've never gotten a wrong answer. So uh, there's probably other places I don't know, but I know that Facebook works.
All right. Where do you recommend getting insurance from, and how to is enough, or how much is enough?
The best insurance companies that I know advertise in the journals, and there's a big one in Texas, and there's a couple other big ones. There's a lot of smaller ones, and some of them don't mind at all taking on bees, and some of them won't touch you with a 20-foot pole. And if somebody said urban, if you're an urban beekeeper and you put a colony in your backyard and you have there's any number of insurance companies I know that will make your insurance policy go away. They don't want the risk. So if you're going to put bees in your backyard, ask first, so that you know that you're not going to have a problem.
All right. Deb wants to know, how do you sign up for the Kim and Jim show to listen to the podcast?
Kim and Jim isn't around anymore. Jim is retired enough that he doesn't want to do that. But the podcast is done by a guy named Jeff Ott, who used to live here in Medina, now lives in Olympia, Washington, and that is beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. Will get you there. And we did talk Jim out of retirement a little bit, and we're going to start doing an occasional podcast with Jim too and Jerry Hayes, the person who took my chair at Bee Culture Magazine, and we're going to call it the Kim and Jim and Jeff and Jerry show. And we're going to be looking at issues in the beekeeping world from 4 different perspectives: a hobby beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper, somebody in the press like Jerry, and a science beekeeper from Jim's point of view. So we're going to try and do one of those a month, but it's beekeepingtodaypodcast.com, and that will get you there.
Leah has a question. What are the regulations on selling bees? What kind of inspections or applications need to be done or taken care of before selling a nuke locally?
Talk to your local inspector, because everything you do has got to come through the Ohio State Department of Agriculture. You have to be inspected so that you can sell, and the people that are buying your bees should be asking you if you've been inspected by your local inspector. And I'm going to bet that there's a sign you can put up that says, yes, I've been inspected, so that they know what they're buying is clean.
A question from Matt. We grow alfalfa on our farm. Is it good for selling honey? And we have about 30 acres of it amongst corn and soybeans.
Oh, alfalfa honey is nice honey. I'm going to bet though you cut it at about 10% bloom, which is when the alfalfa plant has its highest protein content. But if you can let it go another 3 or 4 days and let the bees in there, you'll make a pretty good crop. I don't know if you know about alfalfa flowers. When alfalfa flower blooms, it has a stylus in it that is spring loaded inside the flower, and when the bee tries to get into the flower, that spring loaded stylus snaps up and hits her between the eyes. So what bees learn to do, or try to learn to do if they have enough time, is they'll chew a hole in the bottom of the flower and avoid that stylus, so that they don't get that boink behind. But alfalfa is nice honey, and if you can leave it 3 more days, please, you'll be glad you did.
Jackie has a question. What do you do when you don't have an inspector in your county?
Good question. You can talk to the state inspector, and they can arrange sometimes, if they're able to have the state inspector or a neighboring county inspector come over and work, especially if you have a problem. If you've got a foul brood outbreak, or you've got something going on that you want to sell queens and you need an inspector, you start with the state inspector, Barb Batchelor, and she'll work with you to get it fixed.
And Kim is spot on with that, because I'm the Defiance County inspector and we don't have inspectors in Williams and Paulding County. And then I'm able to, with her permission from ODA, be able to go to other counties. So that works.
Glad I got that right.
Yes, sir. If there's no other questions, I'll give you about 30 more seconds if you have any more questions for Mr. Flottum. If not, I want to thank you very much for your time tonight, Mr. Flottum, and thank you for everybody's patience and sticking in with us till the end. Remember, this will be recorded, or the recording will be edited and put on the new Ohio State YouTube channel. So that'll be posted by next Sunday. I'm going to have a launch of a program for a poll at the end. It says, how did you enjoy Mr. Flottum's presentation, the length of the presentation, and did you learn anything new? That information is going to be put into the OSBA fall conference, and we just want to see what kind of time that you guys think is appropriate and what the content matter is. So we greatly appreciate that. I don't think there's any other questions at this point, but tons of thank yous for Kim and Jamie. Thank you very much. Thank you to Kim. Great class tonight. So thank you very much, Mr. Flottum.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. I don't know if I should apologize for the electronic snafus, but thank all of you for being patient.
Thank you very much, everybody.